you know, get some shut-eye.
Remember, the first rule of being a Marine or a soldier is when you can eat, eat. When you can sleep, sleep. You know, and I mean, I'm sure they're taking advantage of that 15 to 30 minutes that they can after a morning's fight.
You know, you said that there must be a tactical reason, must be a strategic reason. Just to sort of play devil's advocate with you a little bit. Oh, there's a toilet in the Saddam Palace. Just to
gold-plated.
Gold-plated, yeah. Just to play a devil's advocate here a little bit, is there not the possibility that though maybe strategically this particular building is not important, or tactically this particular building is not important, from a psychological operation sense, it's important to hold this, and maybe that will tactically have or strategically have some advantage down the road?
You've answered your own question. It becomes part of the strategic plan. In other words, PSYOPs is an annex in the overall operations plan at the very large strategic level. If the combatant commander decides that it is important, in other words, to send a message to the population that we are now staying in the presidential palace, strategic decision.
Okay, fair point. Again, you're looking at these rather surreal images from inside a presidential palace in Baghdad. Very interesting. Again, these pictures just come in. The first time we are seeing them, taped pictures. We saw actually someone leaving this palace just a short time ago with a small handheld video camera. Not sure if that's where these images are coming from or not. But this one of two presidential palaces now held by U.S. forces. The question is, how long will they hold them for? And that being a question that I think it's fair to say Pentagon officials and CENTCOM officials will tell you, and military units on the ground will tell you, they will decide when they want to give it up, it being up to them. And it's very important that U.S. officials keep making that point, that it's their choosing when they choose to take something, when they choose to leave.
No question, especially when it comes on the heels of Mr. Sahaf continuing to say that there are no coalition troops in Baghdad. And here we have pictures from the airport, we have pictures from the palaces, we have pictures from the embeds from disparate news agencies that are obviously verifying that coalition forces are inside the city, and then to come on the heels of that, to have the Minister of Information say, no, that's not true, it's ridiculous. It just doesn't work.
You might be mistaken in believing this is like a Wayne Newton's house in Vegas, but it's not. It's actually one of two presidential palaces in Baghdad that U.S. forces now seem to be not only occupying but sleeping in from time to time.
It is a statement of the caste kind of society that he had. Look at the opulence. Compare and contrast that with what we've seen in Basra, what we've seen on the outskirts of Baghdad, what we've seen the living conditions are for the people, the general level of wealth. I mean, and think of this as just one of many sites that he operated in, and might have just eaten here and then gone to another palace to sleep. I mean, the level of opulence is incredible.
And now you're looking at a live picture in Baghdad, 12:44 p.m., some 6 hours, 45 minutes or so after this operation got underway. Difficult visibility, quite low. Reem Brahimi reporting there's a sandstorm in Baghdad. We also saw an oil trench fire several hours ago. Reuters reporting that was lit by Iraqi forces who we then saw sort of departing and dissipating along the Tigris River, some of them actually even jumping to the river, some of them carrying weapons, some of them not. Do you anticipate, I mean, what happens to those guys? When we saw them sort of walking up the Tigris, do they just try to regroup with other units, or do they try to just call it a day and take off their clothes and go home?
Some will do both. I mean, in a very organized and disciplined army, you'd establish rally points, and if everything just broke loose and you disintegrated, you'd go to the last known rally point, and then you would rally, count your forces, reorganize, reconstitute, and decide what the best measure was going to be. I don't get the impression that that's occurred here. I think that, in fact, the tactical unit commander at the Iraqi level, the small unit commander, is making those decisions as they happen, which again goes to the lack of cohesion and the ability to mass. They have no ability to mass now. And I think now that they're rocked back on their heels like that, the local combatant commanders are going to ensure they stay that way.
It's an interesting point to mention, too, that on Sunday there was a statement read by a low-level Iraqi official on Iraqi television, such as it is, a statement purported to be from Saddam Hussein, saying that any unit or any soldier separated from their regular unit could simply go and rejoin another Iraqi unit. But whether or not...
Think of what you just said, though, and he would go to that unit, and he hasn't fought with those men or trained with those men, and now add in Yemeni and Jordanian mercenaries, add in the older men in the region who have not trained recently, who have no standard of marksmanship, who haven't handled a gun recently, who may not have ever fired an RPG, and you start to get a fairly clear picture of some of the areas that will be held by people who simply have no chance against an organized and well-disciplined and proficient army.
Just as you were speaking, Kelly, I was handed a report from the Associated Press sort of describing a little bit about life in Baghdad right now, and it brings up a few interesting vignettes I just want to share. Basically, that at the time the U.S. tanks were rolling through Baghdad, it sort of indicates that in other parts of the city, life was continuing somewhat normally. Some residents trying to hitchhike, though their destinations unclear. Most stores remain shut. That Iraqi television and radio that was still on the air, and we know that in some parts of the city there was still not power, but patriotic songs were being broadcast, slogans, archival footage of President Saddam Hussein shooting off guns, and that radio played a religious sermon exhorting Iraqis to fight, denouncing the United States, and that's about it, according to this Associated Press report.
I mean, think of that in the face of seeing a foreign force in your street. I mean, think of the effect of that. You know, think of the, even a person who's not well schooled in the military can notice the dominance, the ability to control the airspace, to control the street space, to not see the enemy's tanks littering the battlefield. I mean, that's not lost on anyone.
Yeah, and this, from this vantage point, another shot we often see of the city of Baghdad. Seemingly normal life, cars, vehicles moving along the road. That statue of Saddam Hussein still intact. Counter that to what we knew went on in central Baghdad at Zahra Park, where Ron Matz with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution reported witnessing, and we actually heard it live on CNN, a statue of Saddam Hussein riding on a horse, a statue that dominated a parade ground in Zahra Park, actually being blown up and torn down by U.S. forces. And now we're seeing more of these interior pictures from one of these presidential palaces now held by U.S. forces. What happens in the next couple of hours, Kelly? I mean, we're not privy to mission details, but what's your sense? They hold these positions for as long as they want. Do you think they're going to withdraw? Do you think this is going to be a longer holding?
All the attacking units are consolidating on the objective. They're taking inventories. They're clearing spaces. They're radioing back their situation, if you will, if they need to resupply, reconstitute, or whatever. And if they're waiting for a frag order, basically a fragmentary order that will either be telling them to do exactly as we planned, whether that's to stay or withdraw, or the opposite, and that's based on that ongoing rapid intel that's going and being passed to the Joint Intelligence Center as they kind of collate it and make sense of it. Again, like we said earlier, it might be that it makes sense to occupy it for a couple of hours, for a day or two, if they think that that is supportable. But certainly no one would ever want to sacrifice troops just for a point that 2 days from now would be irrelevant.
What eternally fascinates me about what is going on in Baghdad right now is because for everything that we can see, there is so much that we can't see that is still going on, both with regular forces, but also with special operations forces who we've known, reports have indicated, have been on the ground in Baghdad for some time. And now that the fact that U.S. forces hold at the very least, the airport, formerly Saddam International Airport, now Baghdad Airport, that would provide them a base of operations as well.
Absolutely, and in fact, as you can imagine, once you gain momentum, you don't want to lose it. So already this is an old battle. The people that are there to pick up intelligence and walk through the objectives and collect that are doing it, and the special operators are either resting or they're already targeted other sites for maybe tomorrow or the next day or 3 days from now. So it's an ongoing process, and once you've got that momentum behind you, it's a very dangerous thing to lose. And I think that the combatant commanders now are trying to decide what's the percentage between the non-combatants left in the city who have not left. Where are the salient points of the combatants that are left? Are they massing? Do they have significant arms caches? Does that become a goal? We still haven't answered the question of weapons of mass destruction, if they believe that there are stores of them in the city.
All right, Kelly, I know you got to go. Appreciate you joining us this morning. Thanks for talking us through
Pleasure,
this.
Anderson.
You continue to look at these pictures, these two images that we are seeing really for the first time. On the left side of your screen, the exterior of one of Saddam Hussein's presidential palaces, now in U.S. hands. On that wide shot, hard to tell, but beneath the arched entranceway is a U.S. tank as well as a number of U.S. Forces, U.S. Army personnel on the ground there. On the right side of your screen, internal shots of the same palace. Grand staircases, grand chandeliers, gold-plated bathroom fixtures, everything one might expect in a presidential palace of Saddam Hussein. The pictures certainly do not disappoint. Significance beyond being getting a sense of the tawdry taste of a potentate, give a sense of just the power U.S. forces have over this one particular installation. And there you see two U.S. soldiers getting some shut-eye, one curled up, one stretched out, but just trying to relax, catch a few minutes sleep perhaps, in what has been a very busy morning for them. Even though all along early reports were indicating that, and again, these are early reports and things change, so I don't want to put too much credence on them, but we've heard from two sources, one Reuters reporting that categorizing the level of resistance that the armored column from the 2nd Brigade, 3rd Infantry Division, that the resistance they met was light. Actually, it was described as moderate. It was Ron Martz of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution who said the resistance was moderate. Certainly, whatever the tactical situation is around this one palace that we are looking at, it does not seem to be thought too extreme, given the sort of relaxed nature of some of the troops we've been seeing on the ground right there. Again, Iraq's information minister, about an hour and a half or two ago, giving a press conference, a rather dramatic press conference outside, stating categorically 65 tanks did not enter Baghdad today. U.S. forces are not in the center of the city. None of what you are seeing is actually happening. Paraphrasing the last statement, but basically Iraq's information minister saying this is simply not happening. This is not real. U.S. forces are not in the city, not in control of the palace you are now seeing the inside of. We also, while we have been watching events in Baghdad, we've been watching events in northern Iraq, a large explosion in Mosul, Ben Wiedemann reporting likely from coalition aircraft. There's also a lot going on in southeastern Iraq, in Basra, the city, the focus of so much activity on the part of British forces who are in control of that region. British forces now have moved into and have taken control of parts of Basra, the city, the first time they're really holding territory inside the city. One piece of property you can say they are holding is another palace inside Basra, and for that we go to a report filed by Mark Bowden, a British reporter, just a short time ago. Let's listen.
Come with me and let me show you what Saddam Hussein has spent some of his smuggled oil revenue on. This, remember, just one of his palaces here in Basra. We go through the big, heavy front door and into a vast entrance hallway. On the floor, as everywhere throughout, marble flooring and intricate detailing. And as we move towards the stairs, you can see throughout the house more marble, more beautiful woodwork, beautiful paneling. Every tread on the stairs is marble, as far as I can work out. The detail on some of the paneling is magnificent. Somebody spent a lot of time and a lot of Saddam's money on detailing all of this beautiful, beautiful marquetry. As we move around the corner, the crunch of glass. When the military came in here, they weren't to know that there was no opposition. But when they got here, Saddam wasn't at home. Again, perhaps ironic given what's happened. Is that a white dove of peace on Saddam's wall? Who knows? Moving further up, again, you're taken in just by the vast size of the area of this place. But for me, the best part of this house, the most beautiful part, is this delicate, almost dovecot-like roof space. Beautiful stained glass, intricate tile work, pastel colors. As you move through, again, the openness. There's not a stick of furniture in this house at all. Nobody has lived here, certainly in the last few months, I suspect, probably never. But if you wanted to go to the loo while you were here, there's one for every room. And not just any old toilet. This is what passes as a WC in Saddam's house. I'm no expert, but these fittings look, at the very least, to be made of gold plate, if not the real McCoy all the way through. But let me show you, when they say buying a house is all about location, 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 look at the location Saddam built his house here in Basra. Again, as we wander through, marvel at the detailing, the beautiful floor work, the beautiful detailed tooling on all this woodwork. But then come into what must be a sunroom, somewhere to take your afternoon tea while you're talking to your generals, and walk out here onto the terrace, and you'll see the beautiful vista, the palm trees in the distance, and in the forefront, the Shatt al-Arab, boats ploughing up and down it. That way you can see the small fishing vessels, and if we pan round to the other side, down there is downtown Basra. And who lives in a place like this? Well, Saddam Hussein lives in a place like this. That's who.
Lifestyles of the rich and dictatorial. You have been watching a tour by a British reporter, Mark Bowden, of a presidential palace, Saddam Hussein, in the southeastern city of Basra. We have just seen a lot of interior shots of a presidential palace in the city of Baghdad, one of two palaces of Saddam Hussein now held by U.S. forces. It has been an extraordinary morning, breaking developments all morning long for the last 6.5 hours or so. U.S. forces moving into the center of Baghdad, holding on to some territory. Who knows what will happen in the coming minutes and hours. That's it for me this morning. CNN's coverage will continue. My colleague Carol Costello coming in, as well as Bill Hemmer in Kuwait City. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back. The coverage continues.
The Chevy Trailblazer worst-case scenario. What to do if tailgated by a giant ore hauler? Don't slow down or pull one of those "I'm braking slightly to freak you out" stunts. You won't like the results. Simply let that standard 275 horsepower Vortec engine send a clear message. Get off my rear, poor man. Here you have a best case scenario. Chevy Trailblazer. Like a rock.
A seaplane teach us about financial advisors. The best ones take you where others can't. At Wachovia Securities, we learn from the world around us. Because regardless of conditions, investment opportunities can be found. Together, we can achieve uncommon results. Wachovia Securities.
Carol Costello here into the heart of Baghdad. Just a little more than 6 hours ago, U.S. forces boldly roll into the ancient capital. Reuters is reporting 105 tanks and Bradley fighting vehicles are now in the city taking key positions. Reports say U.S. forces are near the capital's Al Rashid Hotel, the country's information ministry building, as well as other government buildings. The Pentagon says U.S. forces also have entered Saddam Hussein's presidential palace compound. Earlier today, U.S. Army colonel was standing outside the palace with some of his troops. Says one Pentagon official, we can go where we want, when we want. In northern Iraq, the U.S. Army's 173rd Airborne Brigade has been called into action for the first time in the war. In a pre-dawn assault, the Sky Soldiers fired 2 howitzer cannons at Iraqi soldiers for a solid hour near the city of Erbil. British officials say the notorious Iraqi general known as Chemical Ali is dead. General Ali Hassan al-Majid, Saddam Hussein's cousin, ordered a deadly chemical attack in 1988 that killed 5,000 Kurds in northern Iraq. British officials say Ali was in his Basra home over the weekend when it was bombed by coalition forces. President Bush leaves for Belfast, Northern Ireland, just about 2 hours from now. He's attending a 2-day summit with British Prime Minister Tony Blair and the Irish Prime Minister. They'll discuss Iraqi reconstruction as well as jump-starting the peace process in Northern Ireland and in the Middle East. And coming up, the latest on U.S. troop movements in Baghdad. We'll check in with Walter Rogers, who was with the U.S. Army 7th Cavalry. A surreal message from the Iraqi information minister. Get his take on the coalition ground attack inside Baghdad. Plus, Iraqi citizens and their future. A look at the U.S. strategy after Saddam. CNN's coverage of the war in Iraq continues right now. From the CNN Center in Atlanta, I'm Carol Costello. Good morning to you and to Bill Hemmer in Kuwait.
Hello, Carol. Welcome to another week on this Monday. And wow, it's already been a day here throughout the region. Significant events overnight. U.S. forces operating in the heart of Baghdad earlier today. A live picture from the Iraqi capital is a show of force a short time ago. Ron March, who's a writer embedded with the military, he works for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. He told us live here on CNN the commandos have destroyed a statue of Saddam Hussein sitting on top of a horse. This is in one of the main parks in central Baghdad, right along a reviewing stand where the military parades that we have seen in the past on videotape used to roll by in the Iraqi capital. There was a lot to update our viewers on at this hour. Here's the situation as we have it. We've been monitoring that video out of Baghdad throughout a very fast-moving night. An M1A1 Abrams tank parked at the entrance of one of Saddam Hussein's palaces earlier. Nearby, U.S. troops stand by with their armored vehicles. And despite those forces in the center of town, Iraq's information minister, Mohammed Saeed al-Sahaf, appeared for an impromptu news conference again today. It looked like he was literally standing on a sidewalk on a street in Baghdad. Not only did he deny that U.S. troops had control of any Iraqi buildings, he said they were committing suicide by the hundreds. Also back in New York, UN Secretary General Kofi Annan has called for a special session of the Security Council to meet later today, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, to talk about the issue of Iraq. I want to give you a sense right now of what's happening and how U.S. troops moved into the heart of Baghdad in force earlier today. On the map, you will see the U.S. Army's 101st Airborne Division and the 3rd Infantry Division hit Baghdad from the west. The Marines then went in from the east. They surrounded Baghdad, as we reported last night, according to Walt Rogers, late in the evening on Sunday. And today, coalition forces again went in to hit their targets. Want to get to Walt Rogers straight away. Breaking news yet again, southwest or west of the city of Baghdad. That is where we find Walt again. Walt, good afternoon there. What do you have?
Hello, Bill. Serious American casualties in the battle for Baghdad this morning. One of the things that we have discovered is that an Iraqi missile, some sort of missile, slammed into the TOC, the Tactical Operations Command Center for the 2nd Brigade of the 3rd Infantry Division. Army sources have told CNN that the casualties are at least 6 wounded and 4 to 6 missing in action. That suggests very severe casualties when, as I say, an Iraqi missile hit the Tactical Operations Center of the 2nd Brigade, 3rd Infantry Division in the south of Baghdad this morning. Again, the incursion by the 2nd Brigade into Baghdad today, much different than the 2 previous days. U.S. sources are now telling CNN that there are 3 Army battalions in the heart of Baghdad. They are not going in on just a foray today. Those 3 battalions are inside Baghdad to stay. There has been some trouble inside the city, according to one Army officer. Some U.S. soldiers tried to run up an American flag. That greatly incensed the citizens of Baghdad. It even stirred them and encouraged them to fight harder. The word has now gone out that any U.S. soldier, in some units at least, who tries to run up a U.S. flag in Baghdad is going to get busted. Bill?
Yeah, Walt, this Operations Command Center, I'm assuming that is the eyes and the ears on the ground for commanding certain units of the U.S. Army. Can you give us much more without revealing too much and sacrificing your position there?
Our position is not in danger at this particular moment, although we're expecting to be moving later. What is known at this point, and the Army has confirmed this to us, that the Iraqis fired a missile at a Tactical Operations Center, a TOC. That's the Army acronym. It was the TOC for the 2nd Brigade, the 3rd Infantry Division. The missile slammed into the TOC, and it wounded at least 6 U.S. soldiers in that TOC, and additionally, there are 4 to 6 said to be missing in action as a result of the blast. That has caused U.S. Army soldiers throughout the command, or U.S. Army officers throughout the command, to insist that their soldiers tighten up, not slack off. One soldier said one commanding officer said this battle is far from over, and that Iraqi missile strongly confirms that this morning. Again, one very important thing to repeat, Bill, this foray into the city by the 3rd Infantry Division today, 2nd Brigade, is not just an armed reconnaissance. There are now 3 U.S. Army battalions in the heart of Baghdad itself. I've seen the map. It is the center of Baghdad, and they are going to stay and occupy that, according to sources in the Army here. Bill?
Walt, one more thing here. With this operations center, would it have been traveling through Iraq and defended by Patriot missile batteries, mobile Patriots along the way, or was that not the case with this operations center?
My understanding of the way this works, and remember, I've been floating in and out of the talk of the 7th Cavalry, is these are generally fixed positions. They move. It's a unit headquarters moves from one position to another in the course of the day. When I say a missile, be careful. I'm not suggesting a ballistic missile here. We may be talking about nothing more than a large anti-tank missile or a surface-to-surface missile, which was, again, for the Iraqis, a very fortunate target sighting. It hit a command center for the United States Army's 2nd Brigade, 3rd Infantry Division, just south of Baghdad. Casualties at this point, we can't be more specific than that. Bill?
All right, Walt, one more thing here. What have you been told about resistance on the Iraqi side as these, some describe 70 M1A1 tanks, perhaps 60 Bradley fighting vehicles, which would be a huge amount of armored equipment rolling through the center of Baghdad. Resistance on the other side was what?
Yes, those are the same numbers we're hearing, and the resistance varies, but one thing that greatly increased the resistance was when some young U.S. soldiers got into the heart of the Iraqi capital, Baghdad, and began flying American flags like conquerors. As soon as the command officers found out about that, they started screaming and said, "Take those flags down." One officer said, "If I see anyone in my unit flying an American flag, boasting like a conqueror in the heart of Baghdad, that soldier will be busted out of the Army." Bill?
Walt, thanks. Walt Rogers again, reporting south and west of Baghdad. We will check in with Walt throughout the day, as we have now for the better part of 3 weeks running. The news from Walt right now, those 6 U.S. soldiers injured, 6 others listed right now as missing in action, again from their post south of the capital city. Carol again now at the CNN Center.
Yeah, Bill, we want to take you south and east of Baghdad right now and check in with Martin Savage, embedded with the Marines. Martin, what's it look like from your vantage point?
Well, Carol, about the same time that the U.S. Army was pushing in from the west, the U.S. Marines began pushing in from the east. Specifically, the 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines began driving on a bridge across the Tigris. We understand there, though, they've run into some heavy opposition, including Iraqi artillery. We also understand that there may have been at least one armored personnel carrier struck and that there are casualties and that the artillery continues to be a problem there. From our vantage point here, we can hear also Marine artillery answering back, going off at a fairly steady pace, also occasionally heavy machine gun fire. You hear the rounds leaving the artillery pieces here and then hear them impacting not that far away, and thud after thud after thud. So it appears that there is opposition they're running across as they try to get over onto the western bank of the Tigris River here. Now keep in mind the Tigris snakes around, so there are many times you could end up crossing it. But at this particular juncture, we're not clear exactly where it is. There is resistance that they're dealing with, and that is the 3rd Marines, that is the 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines right now. We're standing by for a reinforcing action if it's called upon. Carol?
I notice you're speaking softly, Martin. You are safe, right?
Yeah, we are. We're not that far away from the fight, but far enough away that it's not going to be raining on us just right now as far as artillery.
And Martin, whenever we hear casualties, we want to know more. What can you tell us?
Well, I can't tell you any more than that. That is just what we have been told, that there have been some casualties. To get into it any more than that, I don't have any specifics as to, obviously we aren't going with names and we don't have specific units involved.
I don't know if you heard Walter Rogers' report, but he said that some of the soldiers from the Army put up flags in Baghdad, and of course that incensed any resistance that was there in the first place. Can you tell us the psychology behind that and why American troops might want to do that, even though they know that their mission is not to occupy Baghdad?
Well, these are men that have been training and practicing and been readying themselves for warfare for obviously, in some cases, years. And there is a lot of pent-up, I guess, excitement, you could say. And they are proud. They are very proud in their accomplishments and their achievements. And they're proud, obviously, for the nation in which they're fighting for, and that is, of course, the United States and Great Britain. So it has been shunned as far as many commanders saying, look, this is not about conquering a nation. This is about liberating a people. And in previous instances where there have been reports of flags either being raised or being waved, those are quickly admonished and said that that's not what we're here for. This is for the Iraqi people, not for us to sit here and wave a flag in some sort of triumph. So we haven't seen it with the Marines here. I have not witnessed it in any way, shape, or form. These are just young men and women that are pumped up. They know that they may be in a fight, and psychologically they are revved and ready to go.
Understand. One more question
Carol?
before I let you go. Do you see that the nature of the conflict is changing now?
Well, I think the nature of it is that, as today exemplifies, it's becoming much more aggressive as far as trying to focus on Baghdad. We have been slowly moving up at certain areas of the eastern suburbs. And part of what we do, as far as the Marines and their role, is to act in a blocking position. There are a number of units that were off to the east of Baghdad of the Iraqi Republican Guard. There were a number of regular military units that were way off to the east on the Iranian border. And there has always been the desire on the part of the Marines to cut that avenue of reinforcement, perhaps, for the Iraqis off, which is why moving up on the eastern side is not only to encircle the city, but also to cut off any reinforcements from coming back into the city. Carol?
Martin Savage with the Marines. And as he said, they're meeting resistance as they try to cross a bridge over the Tigris. Let's head back to Kuwait City and Bill.
Yeah, Carol, listen, there's a lot of attention on Baghdad, but certainly Basra continues to be a very hot story in the southeastern part of Iraq. About 2 hours ago, the British were reporting that the body of Chemical Ali had been found somewhere, perhaps in his own home in Basra. Again, that word coming out just a few hours ago. It was over the weekend where we heard about Ba'ath Party headquarters being targeted by U.S. airstrikes about 2.5 days ago. The reports from yesterday had indicated that a large number of Ba'ath Party members had been inside of that home. Quite possibly the general known as Chemical Ali, the man accused of gassing the Kurds 15 years ago, killing 5,000, was inside that home at the time, targeted and killed as a result. The other story hearing about Basra is this. The British are saying that they now control most of that city, still some pockets of resistance and what they describe as the old part of town, but most of it right now under control of the British. We're going to get a reporter up in a moment on Basra. In the meantime, though, Central Command and Tom Mantier has a lot of news yet again there today. Let's go to Tom right now and check in right now on what's happening there. Tom, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Bill. We definitely have our plate full here. The last 6 hours, the pictures we've been seeing coming out of Baghdad, nothing short of spectacular inside the palaces, on the streets, seeing the ability of the U.S.-led coalition to make their way into the city seemingly at will. Now, what we're hearing here at Central Command is that this may be a move-in and move-out operation as it was over the weekend, but there seems to be some indications much more visible, much deeper into the center of the city of Baghdad as the U.S. troops are moving around the city. Not about capturing territory, according to U.S. officials here at CENTCOM, but about sending a psychological message. Over the weekend, the message was that we have the ability to bring our tanks and armored personnel carriers into your city so you can hear them. Well, early this morning they had air power over the city. The A-10s could clearly be seen flying low level over Baghdad, and then the thunder of tanks coming into the city, again, clearly sending a message. Now, we did hear from the public affairs officer here at CENTCOM calling this a raid.
I wouldn't call them a probing action, but on the other end, I wouldn't call it a come in and stain. This would be an armored raid through the city, bringing down any resistance that we meet, and also taking down any leadership capabilities that we see as we go through.
One thing Captain Thorpe made it clear was that there may be tougher days ahead, jubilation, celebration, as you heard a little bit, maybe too much bravado by some units of hoisting the American flag at locations in downtown Baghdad where that was quickly ordered to be stopped by the commanders, saying that we're here about the liberation of the people, not the occupation of territory. So the CENTCOM officials here indicating that this indeed was a raid, but it may be more difficult times ahead, a message that they have sent frequently. Now let's move down south to Basra. All along, the coalition has indicated this is about removing the regime, not occupying or conquering cities. Another indication of part of that regime, at least, the man known as Chemical Ali, may have been removed over the weekend in a U.S.-led airstrike on Basra on his residence. Now, yesterday we did hear confirmation from CENTCOM officials that the bodyguard of Chemical Ali, his body had been found in the rubble of that residence. Today, British officials are saying that Chemical Ali and another head of the intelligence section in southern Iraq had been found and located in the rubble as well. Now, this indeed would be significant because Chemical Ali was put in charge by Saddam Hussein of defending southern Iraq, something that apparently did not go very well. This is also the man in 1988 who used poison gas against the Kurds in northern Iraq. It's also the man who was the governor of Kuwait during the occupation before the Gulf War first. So British officials saying that it is quite probable that Chemical Ali is dead, that they have found his body in Basra as British armor made their way into the city, but a full lock-on confirmation still has not been developed.
Well, obviously, he was a man we were very keen to find, capture, if possible, but if this is indeed the case, and I haven't had it confirmed yet through the military chain of command, but indeed the messages that I'm hearing, both here in the information center and from other sources, are that indeed they have found his body.
If indeed it is true that Chemical Ali has been found dead, it is the first leadership target of opportunity, so to speak, that has been confirmed. There have been shadowy references in the past that targets of opportunity were seen and that strikes were launched, but we never have heard any conclusive results, as we're now hearing from Basra, that Chemical Ali himself may be dead. Back to you.
All right, Tom, thanks. Tom and Tier watching things at CENTCOM. There was a lot happening down there today and a lot to keep track of. We should hear more 7 a.m. Eastern time. That's the schedule again today, an hour and 40 minutes from now. And we'll get more also on the targets inside of Baghdad. We've heard about one of the main presidential palaces for Saddam Hussein, which is centers right in the middle of that city, just west of the Tigris River. Also hearing word about the information ministry, at least what's left of it anyway, based on the number of cruise missiles that we have been told through CENTCOM that have gone into this building over the past 2.5 weeks running. And the Al Rashid Hotel, interestingly enough, this is where in 1991 the journalists were housed for the first Persian Gulf War. It was in that hotel where CNN reporters Bernard Shaw, John Holloman, and Peter Arnett were stationed for the first Persian Gulf War of January of 1991. By the way, there is a tile mosaic, we're told, on the inside as you walk into that hotel on the floor of the first President Bush, George Bush, number 41. Perhaps that was a target again today for the U.S. coalition forces to go in there. The journalists working here in Kuwait tell us that the basement of that hotel is essentially a bunker where in the past large groups of Ba'ath Party officials have congregated before in times of military attacks, and perhaps, again, we are told, nothing to confirm on this right now, but they may have been taking refuge at this point today. Much more on the targets inside of Baghdad. I'm certain we'll get it, Carol, when CENTCOM briefs a bit later today. Back to you now at the CNN.
Yeah, you mentioned a lot has happened this morning. Well, it has, and we want to take you through it right now. This is developments over the last several hours on day 18 of Operation Iraqi Freedom. At 7 a.m. local time, Baghdad residents wake to gunfire. At 9:30 a.m. local time, U.S. tank shells rocked the Iraqi capital. And less than an hour later, U.S. forces moved into a presidential palace compound. At 10:30 a.m. local time, U.S. forces blew up a statue of Saddam Hussein in Zahra Park. And 5 minutes after that, the Iraqi information minister talks to reporters and denies U.S. forces have even advanced on Baghdad. Now on the phone with us, Simon Robinson from Time Magazine. And Simon, you are inside Baghdad, in eastern Baghdad, is that right?
That's correct. The Marines this morning, probably around 2 hours ago, pushed into southeastern Baghdad across the canal. They're in the suburbs of southeastern Baghdad now. The army's in the west, obviously, as we just heard. the bridge that they crossed had been partially destroyed by retreating Iraqi troops, and so they had to cross on foot. Infantry pushed across, and now they've secured a perimeter of probably a couple of kilometers deep into those suburbs in southeastern Baghdad.
I don't know if you're exactly in the same place, but Martin Savage just reported a short time ago that Iraqi forces did open fire and there are casualties. Do you know anything about that?
There was an incident this morning near the bridge around 15 minutes before the infantry were about to punch out, where an Amtrak vehicle full of Marines was hit. The incident is still a bit sketchy. What happened is there's some suggestion that it might have been friendly fire from artillery, American artillery. There's also the suggestion that it could have been counter-battery fire from Iraqi forces in Baghdad. Obviously, there's going to be an investigation into that. It's a little bit unclear at this stage, but it did come in the middle of a very heavy American bombardment of artillery. So that possibility remains quite fire.
Assuming that the Iraqis are somewhat fighting back, what kind of resistance are you seeing?
I'm now on the back on the south side of the bridge. I've just come back, having spent the last couple of hours on the north side of the bridge, or the northeastern side. There was very little resistance, to be honest. There was evidence of strong fortifications. They'd been abandoned, and while there were some Iraqi bodies of Iraqi soldiers, there weren't that many. I saw perhaps a dozen. So it looks like the Iraqi forces have withdrawn, and the Marines encountered very little resistance.
I hear the weather is changing too. We can see a haze hanging over Baghdad right now. What is that like, and how is it affecting troops?
Well, compared to yesterday, it's probably helping them. Yesterday was very, very hot, and the Marines that I'm embedded with, traveling through the towns leading up to the suburbs of southeastern Baghdad, were fighting in their chemical suits, and it was extremely hot, temperatures over 100 degrees. So that was difficult, and there were some heat casualties during that fighting. Today, with overcast conditions, it's probably easier for them.
You were talking about chemical suits, so troops are still wearing them.
In fact, this morning they took them off, based, I guess, on some intelligence that the threat level has gone down, and also on their ability to fight. It is degraded somewhat by, when it's really hot, by those suits. But as I'm looking around me now, I see Marines, at least, have taken, most Marines have taken their chemical suits off for the first time since the beginning of this war, around 15, 16 days ago.
I guess that surprises me, because you would think as troops moved into Baghdad, the threat of the use of chemical weapons would increase.
I'm not sure. I haven't yet got to someone who can give me the answer to why last night the decision, at least with this battalion of, or this regiment of Marines, why the suits are off. But it did come after a day of heavy fighting and some heat casualties, as I mentioned. But perhaps the intelligence is, and I'm only surmising this, that the threat level has gone down. But yet, you're right. You would think as you got closer it would go up.
And one last question before I let you go. Tell me what's happening right now, and if you can see any civilians around where you are.
There are some civilians, people coming out of the town on the southern side of the bridge that the Marines have taken this morning, kind of looking on. And as I'm talking to you, I'm just a few hundred meters up the road. The Marines are building a bridge across the canal into the suburbs of southeastern Baghdad to replace that bridge that the Iraqis partially destroyed, so that they can get vehicles across and move up further north.
Well, let me ask you about that before you go. You say the Iraqis partially destroyed this bridge, and we'd understood that they'd planted explosives in those bridges in preparation for doing something like this. Is that what happened?
It appears that at least the bridge that the Battalion 3-4 that I'm with was certainly blown at one point. Evidence that other charges are still on there, ready to be blown. I know there's another bridge to the north, which I heard that had happened to, that there were explosives. It was wired up, basically. But it looks like perhaps the Marines secured the bridge before they were able to finish the job perhaps that they had planned.
All right, Simon Robinson, we'll let you get back to work. Appreciate your time. Let's head back to Kuwait City and Bill Hemmer.
All right, Carol, listen, we have focused an awful lot on Baghdad, and certainly that is the center of the story again today. But in the north there, the fighting does continue. Jane Araf by way of video phone now checking in. I believe you're near the town of Mosul, Jane. I'm not quite sure on much more information outside of that. Fill us in. What's happening?
Bill, we're actually near a key junction that leads to Mosul and to Kirkuk. Now, we're on a ridge, a very windswept ridge, with U.S. Special Forces who have been here since yesterday holding this down. Now, there was a battle here yesterday that raged all day long with the Special Forces firing Javelin anti-tank missiles and launching bombs from F-14s to take out Iraqi tanks. Today, they're still on this ridge, and they're trying to move forward. They've sent up APCs, Humvees, further up to see what it looks like. They're not meeting any Iraqi resistance so far, and what they're targeting is a key intersection. It's about 2 miles from here, and it is almost halfway between those two major cities, Mosul and Kirkuk. On one side Mosul, on the other Kirkuk. Now, it could be a while before they go down that road, even if they take that intersection. They just don't have a lot of forces here on the ground. It's quite a sober atmosphere here today with the Kurdish fighters, Bill, following that friendly fire incident, which happened just down the road from here. There were at least 45 people injured, at least 18 killed, all of them Kurdish. But there was some good news for the Kurdish fighters. It was the reported death of the man they know as Chemical Ali Hassan Majid, responsible for the gassing of Kurdish villages. Bill?
Yeah, Jane, listen, I understand as the coalition forces and the Kurds as well move throughout Iraq, there are large caches of ammunition that are found in numerous locations. I believe you have found one as well. What happened with it?
I'm sorry, Bill. There's just been we're just trying to figure out what that is. They seem to be just behind this front line here. The Iraqis are engaging the special forces, and we're hearing explosions off in the distance. We can't see it from here, but I don't know, Bill, if you can hear that loud series of explosions.
We certainly can, Jane. Keep going so long as you feel safe and secure there.
I'm told that it appears to be an Iraqi vehicle that has been engaged by the Special Forces reconnaissance. Now, they are up on a further ridge. They've been there all morning. This is actually the first fighting that we have heard. They seem to have thought that they wouldn't need a lot of Iraqi resistance. They took out what could have been 10 tanks yesterday. There was very heavy air attacks, very heavy ground fire, and the Iraqis essentially had been doing virtually nothing this morning, but we now are seeing some Iraqi resistance just ahead of that key intersection, which, as I say, goes to Mosul and Kirkuk. Now, Bill, you had been asking about arms cache. You might have been referring to what we were seeing in Mosul, which was huge explosions, now very dramatic ones, and that does seem to have been an ammunition depot that was bombed, accounting for those spectacular explosions. There has been a slow and steady attack on Mosul, on key military sites, but again, forces here are in no hurry to take Mosul or Kirkuk. They just don't have the ground forces here, following Turkey's rejection of allowing U.S. ground troops. And the Peshmerga, the Kurdish forces themselves, can't do it alone. That would would get Turkey involved, sending in troops. I'm just seeing what's going on behind me. We still have some special forces on the ridge. They have been looking through the sights of those Javelin anti-tank missiles to see what's going on further ahead. And there are spotters further up the road. But as I said, the Iraqi forces seem to have engaged the reconnaissance group, Special Force reconnaissance mission that was just up the road, just ahead of that key intersection. Bill?
All right, Jane, listen, I cannot see your image from my location here in Kuwait. I know you're on video phone. If it's possible, perhaps we can pan off if it's not too far in the distance and perhaps give our viewers a better idea what you're witnessing there. And also, Jane, I don't want to keep you here if you don't feel safe or secure at this point.
We're actually fine here. We're on this ridge, just behind the ridge, and we can take cover pretty easily if they do send artillery our way. But we will try to show you a little bit of what's happening. Chris? I wonder if you could pan around and just give them an idea of what we're looking at. It is, as I said, a very windswept ridge. It's about 20 miles out of the major Kurdish city of Erbil. We have the Kurdish Peshmerga here, quite a few of them today. As I said, all of them quite sober after that horrifying incident yesterday, friendly fire. You can see the topography here, Bill. It's very mountainous. And that's essentially what has slowed down the fighting and really why the U.S. Special Forces find the Peshmerga so valuable. The Peshmerga means, as you know, those who defy death. And they are people who have fought in the mountains for decades. They know this land, they know the landscape, they know how to fight in the mountains, and the Special Forces have been using them to help them get a hold of this terrain.
Jane, in this war right now, the headline seems to change. The headline seems to change just about every hour. And yesterday, when that friendly fire incident went down, it was the headline for a period of, say, 6 to 8 hours. Today, now 24 hours later, have you been able to tell as to whether or not that incident has thrown off any of the Kurdish fighters, any of the special forces operating there?
It's quite remarkable, Bill. The Kurdish fighters, and who essentially, as I say, have fought in the mountains, guerrilla warfare. They're trained to live on basically nothing. They are tough. I mean, there is no disputing it. And I've been asking because I've been absolutely astounded at the fact that there isn't more emotion shown, that there isn't more anger shown, certainly. But genuinely, there seems to be none. They're extremely grateful to the Americans. They love the American forces. They want to fight more with them. They want more arms. They want to go further. And they see this as basically an inevitable casualty of war. Now, Peshmerga means those who defy death, but of course they don't expect to defy death from their allies, from the sky. But they do have seemed to have taken it quite matter-of-factly. Political leaders as well have been downplaying it to the extent that they're saying that this is inevitable. It was a horrible mistake, but these things are bound to happen. Now, one of the terrible things, as you know, Bill, about that friendly fire incident is that there were two casualties, the brother and the son of Masoud Barzani, who is the Kurdish leader in this part of Iraqi Kurdistan. He is revered, and his brother was respected as well. His brother was flown in critical condition to a U.S. Army hospital in Germany. The son was slightly injured. As for the Special Forces, they were not aware of any American casualties in that horrible incident. They sent their medics here from this site, from this ridge, with Special Forces, to go and treat some of the wounded. And they described absolutely horrific scenes of people lying everywhere, debris strewn everywhere. But possibly because there weren't any Americans involved, there wasn't really the level of emotion that there might have been. Bill?
All right, Jane, thanks. Jane Arath, keep us posted by way of video phone on that road connecting eventually to Mosul in the northern part of Iraq. And to our viewers at home, if you're just joining us yet again, it has been another fascinating day of quick happening developments throughout, especially in the town of Baghdad, where we have seen videotape come to us at points, Carol. I know you saw this a bit earlier today. That line of Iraqi soldiers who are essentially fleeing along the banks of the Tigris River, at times peeling away their uniforms, peeling away their weapons, and sometimes sticking them underneath trees, trying to get away from the fighting. The developments are fast and furious, as they have so many times in the past 3 weeks, but yet again today we are seeing more and more movement toward the center of Baghdad, and possibly some sort of resolution in this war that is not quite 3 weeks old. Carol?
It has been an extraordinary morning, Bill. It is 5:35 Eastern Time. Want to bring our viewers up to date now before you head off to work. U.S. forces strike deep into the heart of Baghdad. Just about 7 hours ago, U.S. forces boldly rolled into the ancient capital. Reuters is reporting 105 tanks and Bradley fighting vehicles are now in the city, taking up key positions. Reports say U.S. forces are near the capital's Al Rashid Hotel, the country's information ministry building, as well as other government buildings. The Pentagon says U.S. forces have also entered Saddam Hussein's presidential palace compound. Earlier today, a U.S. Army colonel was standing outside of the palace with some of his troops. Says one Pentagon official, "We can go where we want, when we want." In northern Iraq, the U.S. Army's 173rd Airborne Brigade has unleashed a barrage of heavy artillery on Iraqi forces. CNN's Thomas Nybo is with the Sky Soldiers. He says the pre-dawn assault lasted about an hour. It's the first time the 173rd has been called into action since the Vietnam War. And according to British military officials, the body of the Iraqi general known as Chemical Ali has been found. Ali, whose real name is Ali Hassan al-Majid, is Saddam Hussein's cousin, and he's reported to have ordered the use of chemical weapons against the Kurds back in 1988, killing about 5,000 people. Coalition forces bombed his home in the southern city of Basra over the weekend and killed him. It will be a trifold summit for President Bush as he meets British Prime Minister Tony Blair in Belfast, Northern Ireland. On their agenda, reviewing final battle strategies and post-war plans for Iraq, new peace efforts for Northern Ireland, and a Middle East peace plan leading to a Palestinian state. And we want to take you back inside Baghdad, where the fighting has been fierce. Let's check in with Reem Brahimi to help us do that. She's in Jordan, and I want to go over a few of these landmarks where American military forces are right now. The first, Zahra Park.
Zahra Park, Carol, is a park that's actually in reconstruction about 15 days ago when the US-led campaign began. It's a huge amusement park. Part of it is was still working. A lot of families were going there actually even to the last day before the war began. And also it's next to the zoo of Baghdad. Now all that is a huge area. It's quite vast, if you will, stretches out. Baghdad is quite a wide city, lots of wide avenues and broad streets. It's not far from either the Rashid Hotel or the presidential compound of the Republican Palace, or from the Foreign Ministry and the Ministry of Information. All these are basically within 10 minutes driving range maximum. Now, the Zahra Park area, I understand from people I spoke to in Baghdad who just passed in front of that the other day, Carol, well, that's been more or less reduced to rubble. Not clear what the buildings, if all the buildings are still standing, but somebody described that area to me as being in a lot of rubble. Basically, we're having a city, Carol, that people I spoke to in Baghdad described as a city in state of war. It's just that there's a lot of confusion as to who is doing what in Baghdad, and if you speak to two people who just live in different neighborhoods, they don't know the same thing. One of them will tell you one thing and somebody will tell you something else.
Right, let's go back to Zahra Park for just a second, because there were two huge statues here that coalition forces took down. One, a giant 40-foot statue of Saddam Hussein, correct?
Yes, that's absolutely right. Of course, it's very difficult to describe and note which statues are where, because there are so many statues of President Saddam Hussein, but that one particularly huge. There was also one near the monument, near the parade ground, that I understand had been placed recently. That parade ground is the one with the two swords crossing each other, like a sort of victory arch, and it was built to mark the victory, or what President Saddam Hussein called the victory of Iraq over Iran in the 8-year war between the two countries. Basically all these, Carol, including the Republican Palace, including the Ministry of Information, all these sites, clearly symbolic sites for the US to be raiding right now. Just a way of saying that they can go to these very, very symbolic sites that represent the sovereignty not only of Iraq, but probably the sovereignty or the leadership itself more than anything else.
We're seeing a picture now of that statue that you were talking about with the crossed swords. Also, coalition forces were inside one of Saddam Hussein's presidential palaces. I don't know how important this particular presidential palace is, because of course he has a lot of them.
Well, absolutely, Carol. He does have a lot of palaces, and that palace would probably have been maybe more important 15 days ago, before the campaign was launched. But it has been bombed again and again. It was one of the first things that was bombed. On some nights you could even see fire burning still through the windows of one of the palaces after bombing, overnight bombing. So it's unlikely that there would be anyone that the US would be interested in attacking in terms of members of the leadership in the palace at this time. But on the other hand, again, important in terms of symbolism. I understand actually that that's a place where the Iraqis did retaliate, and there was quite a battle going on for some time.
Yeah, and now we have pictures.
According to people who heard that.
Yeah, now we have pictures of coalition forces taking a nap inside that palace. Fascinating pictures this morning. Something else that was rather surreal, there was sort of an impromptu press conference given by the Iraqi information minister, and he denied again that coalition forces were even in Baghdad.
Yes, absolutely. That was very interesting. Actually, let's listen to what he said exactly, basically addressing that issue, telling reporters in effect that there were no US troops inside the Iraqi capital, just as there was fire burning and you could hear shelling right behind him on the other side of the river, telling reporters that in fact there were 2 tanks that had entered the capital and that the Iraqi forces had surrounded them and slaughtered them, and promising them more retaliation in the near future. Let's just listen to how he put it.
I will not mention the number of the people killed from their troops or what has been destroyed. The battle is still going on, and I can say, and you can actually mark it for me, you can record it for me, they are beginning to commit suicides on the walls of Baghdad. And we will, in fact, encourage them to commit more suicides.
Now, Carol, that's interesting because, of course, beyond the surreal aspect of this statement or this declaration made by the Minister of Information, it's interesting because it does raise a few questions over what is actually happening in terms of Iraqi resistance. None of the Republican guards have been seen so far immediately. None of the special Republican forces either. The Republican guards would tend to stay outside of the capital because for a long time they weren't allowed inside, but the special Republican guards don't seem to have appeared as a great resisting force either. Now that would raise the question of, is there going to be some resistance that's being prepared right now, or is this basically it?
Yeah.
Carol?
You know, another issue that's raised since, you know, the Iraqis imposed this curfew, 6P to 6A, and coalition forces are now coming in ever closer to, well, they're in the center of Baghdad right now, so you have to think of humanitarian aid, and with the few people that are left in the city, are they getting what they need?
Well, that's a very important question indeed, and I've spoken to officials from the Red Cross, and they're very concerned because, first of all, there's a system, a hospital system that seems to be functioning very well from what they say, which is that as soon as casualties are brought in, the wounded are dispatched to the various hospitals that can deal with the various specialties or various surgeries that these patients would need, and that's been functioning. Now, if you're having street battles and tanks in the streets of Baghdad, that's going to be made much more difficult. The Red Cross is also focusing on water and electricity. As you know, Carol, electricity has been cut off the Iraqi capital, and so that's a problem for hospitals. It's a problem for water because they can't purify or pump out water, so they have engineers. The Red Cross is sending engineers to water purification plants and to hospitals to see if generators are still working, and they're also distributing, I understand, tens of thousands of 1 liter plastic bags of water to hospitals to make sure that they have enough at least to keep going for the time being. Carol?
I understand. Reem Brahimi, thanks for your insight. Very helpful this morning. Let's head back to Kuwait City now, and Bill.
All right, Carol, certainly a lot has happened overnight, local time here in Kuwait and also in Baghdad. The developments right now, as they stand right now, regarding the war in Iraq. 7 a.m. local time, right around daybreak, Baghdad awakened to gunfire. 9:30 a.m. local time, tank shells rocking the Iraqi capital. Less than an hour after that, U.S. forces moved into that presidential palace compound. We're told significant damage, too, in that compound based on the cruise missile strikes that have struck it now for almost 3 weeks running. At 10:30 a.m. local time, U.S. forces blew up a statue of Saddam Hussein in Zahra Park, as Reem was just talking about, center part of the city, where a number of those military parades used to parade. About 5 minutes after that, the Iraqi information minister, Mohammed Saeed al-Sahaf, talks to reporters and denies yet again that U.S. forces have advanced on Baghdad. Now, on Saturday and Sunday this past weekend, we were reporting that there were incursions in and out of Baghdad, but earlier today, a member of the U.S. Army in the Iraqi capital said this time it is for real. A quote from him earlier today. From the Pentagon now, and Kathleen Koch watching things from there. Kathleen, what are they saying at this very early hour in D.C.? Kathleen, we're on the air. Good morning there.
Hello, Bill. I'm taking this now. We're getting a little feedback. Basically, here at the Pentagon, this tactic that we're seeing today, this bold foray into the heart of the city, came as obviously a surprise to the Iraqis, but as a surprise also to some of us. There had been talk about this strategy of encircling the city, of bringing troops up around from both the east and from the west up toward the north, and to basically control the flow of reinforcements for the Iraqis into the city, control the flow of any weapons into the city, and then generally squeeze any remaining loyalists to the Iraqi regime into ever shrinking portions of the city and basically cut them off and force them to surrender. Now, instead, what we saw today was this bold foray into the very heart of Baghdad, something again largely unexpected, and into very symbolic spots like Saddam Hussein's palaces. The Pentagon saying, quote, "It can't be anything but alarming to see a brigade commander standing in the compound of a presidential palace in Baghdad." The Pentagon calling this action a show of force and saying that we are dominating the battlefield. Now, this coming, as Reem mentioned, the Iraqi information minister saying that Baghdad is safe and secure and great, and that it was indeed not under the control of U.S. forces. But clearly the United States military made very certain to launch this bold attack into the heart of Baghdad within clear and direct view of these pre-positioned cameras, international television cameras. A spokesman for CENTCOM, Captain Frank Thorpe, saying, quote, "This will give the first real view of U.S. forces moving through the city." Thorpe also saying, very oddly, this is just another day. Bill, I think we can certainly see it was not just another day.
Boy, that's so true. Kathleen, thank you, and thanks for hanging in there with that technical snafu. Kathleen Koch at the Pentagon. Here's Carol again at CNN.
All right, thanks, Bill. We want to take you to the southeastern portion of Iraq, to Basra, where British forces have entered the city and have entered another of Saddam Hussein's palaces. Reporter David Bowden is there. And just a short time ago, David, you were actually inside that palace.
That's right, Carol. It's some place, but just let me tell you about this whole infrastructure here. There's maybe 20 or 30 acres on this palace site. There are lots of buildings. There's a big lake in the middle of it. It really is some place. And of course, the significance of it is this is iconic of Saddam's power here in the south. And of course, what the Royal Marines, the British forces who took it, were doing was saying, look, you're no longer the big kid in town here. This is a coalition town now. Your power structure is broken. But let's just get an idea of what this palace looks like inside. Let me take you for a tour. Come with me and let me show you what Saddam Hussein has spent some of his smuggled oil revenue on. This, remember, just one of his palaces here in Basra. We go through the big, heavy front door and into a vast entrance hallway. On the floor, as everywhere throughout, marble flooring and intricate detailing. And as we move towards the stairs, you can see throughout the house more marble, more beautiful woodwork, beautiful paneling. Every tread on the stairs is marble, as far as I can work out. The detail on some of the paneling is magnificent. Somebody spent a lot of time and a lot of Saddam's money on detailing all of this beautiful, beautiful marquetry. As we move around the corner, the crunch of glass. When the military came in here, they weren't to know that there was no opposition. But when they got here, Saddam wasn't at home. Again, perhaps ironic given what's happened. Is that a white dove of peace on Saddam's wall? Who knows? Moving further up, again, you're taken in just by the vast size of the area of this place. But for me, the best part of this house, the most beautiful part, is this delicate, almost dovecot-like roof space. Beautiful stained glass, intricate tile work, pastel colors. As you move through, again, the openness. There's not a stick of furniture in this house at all. Nobody has lived here, certainly in the last few months, I suspect, probably never. But if you wanted to go to the loo while you were here, there's one for every room, and not just any old toilet. This is what passes as a WC in Saddam's house. I'm no expert, but these fittings look, at the very least, to be made of gold plate, if not the real McCoy all the way through. But let me show you, when they say buying a house is all about location, 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 Look at the location Saddam built his house here in Basra. Again, as we wander through, marvel at the detailing, the beautiful floorwork, the beautiful detailed tooling on all this woodwork. But then come into what must be a sunroom, somewhere to take your afternoon tea while you're talking to your generals, and walk out here onto the terrace, and you'll see the beautiful vista, the palm trees in the distance, and in the forefront, the Shatt al-Arab, boats ploughing up and down it. That way you can see the small fishing vessels, and if we pan round to the other side, down there is downtown Basra. And who lives in a place like this? Well, Saddam Hussein lives in a place like this. That's who. Well, Carol, it needs a bit of a wash and a brush up, but if you're looking for a house in the sun, make me an offer.
Oh, my goodness. You know what really struck me about that? There is absolutely no sign of life, no sign that anyone has lived there recently. Did you see any of that?
No, and when the troops arrived here, they were prepared for quite a struggle. This, obviously, as I said before, a symbol of Saddam's power here in Basra. They expected a fight, but they just walked straight through the doors. Some 5 or 6 hours ago, this place still hadn't been taken. Within an hour of them moving in here, we were following them up the road. Not a shot was fired in anger as far as I can see. The only people they came across were a few looters trying to get their own back on the man who up until now had been the law in this town.
Any documents inside that British forces took out?
As far as we can see, there's nothing at all in the house. As I said before, not a stick of furniture. The keys are still in a lot of the doors. It's either been fairly recently refurbished or nobody has ever lived here at all. But remember, Saddam Hussein has palaces across the country. This was a man who liked to live high on the hog. And of course, if you're smuggling oil out whilst your people suffer, then you've probably got quite a lot of money to spend.
Yeah, as far as I can tell, he has 8 palaces that cover 11 square miles in all different places throughout Iraq. One more question for you. Chemical Ali, we know he's dead now. How has that changed the fighting in and around Basra?
I'm not sure it's had a massive effect. You remember that Basra was never a great supporter of Saddam Hussein. It's just that most of the people here were too frightened to say so. I suppose with his cousin, the general, out of the way, people now feel a bit freer to express their thoughts. I was speaking to some doctors just down the way at the hospital here saying, well, you know, are you looking forward to a future without Saddam Hussein? They nodded furiously. People here were never great fans of him. And I think once he's gone and gone for good, a lot of people here will breathe a big sigh of relief.
And how much control of Basra do British forces have right now?
Militarily, pretty much complete. There is still some firing. We've had Cobra attack helicopters swooping up and down the Shatt al-Arab just to the side of me here, moving in and taking pot shots at various targets. But I was speaking to a British tank captain earlier this morning who said that there was no real organized resistance. There were still small groups of people, but they didn't appear to be any military cohesive force. I think it's pretty much, to all intents and purposes, nailed down as a coalition city now.
And just one more question about this palace. Will British troops stay there or will they leave it behind?
Who knows? They are already looking at the sort of superstructure of it, if you like. They're trying to get the water running again. They're trying to get the electricity and the power back on. If they can do that, then it would make an ideal and very grandiose headquarters for whoever ends up running this particular part of Iraq. As I said before, it really is a splendid building, and it's not the only one. There must be a dozen, not quite up to the same spec, but at least it's a nice roof over your head and plenty of space.
Definitely so. David Bowden reporting live from Basra. Thanks so much. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll have so much more about the fighting inside Baghdad.
Even in the beginning, we were building some of the most technologically advanced cars in the world.
We still are.
must be 50 ways the aerobed saves the day.
Like reason 19, you've got the guest room, but no guest bed.
Number 3, your guest bed invites your guest to go away. Relax. Just plug in the aerobed, push the button, and you have a comfortable, adjustable extra bed in less than 1 minute. The new pump is recessed and is 30% more powerful with quadra-coil construction for a smoother surface. It's even adjustable with our exclusive one-touch comfort control. And it can hold up to 650 pounds. Plus, it stores away in seconds. And now you can get the new and improved aerobed at the same low price.
Call now to get the aerobed for just 3 easy payments of only $33.
Plus, get this free carry bag and get our 30-night money-back guarantee.
Buy now. That's just 3 payments of $33 or visit a fine retail store near you.
How many ways will you use your aerobed?
If you were born between 1918 and 1963, call the number on your screen now to find out more about the Silver Care Plan. The average funeral now costs over $6,000. But did you know your survivors may only be able to receive government death benefits up to $300 if they qualify? The Silver Care Plan is a way to help protect your loved ones. To get free information about the plan, just call the number on your screen.
Back here live in Kuwait City, I want to take you again to the north, in the northern part of the country, where the Kurdish soldiers right now continue their fight, along with special operations forces as well. Jana Raff reported about 30 minutes ago the note of optimism that she has found in Kurdish soldiers after the British now say that the body of Chemical Ali has been found in Basra. Well, along with the Kurds in the northern part of Iraq is award-winning photographer David Turnley. He now has a look at the war through the images of his own camera and the eyes and the faces of the Kurdish people.